Hi, I'm Stefan, product lead at Avassa. You've previously seen videos on adding sites, deploying and upgrading applications. We will now move over to day 2 operations. I will show you how to monitor sites and to monitor applications. Talking about operations and monitoring, it's important to understand that there are 4 very important steps in being able to observe your edge infrastructure and applications. Firstly, you need to identify if there is a fault and where. Secondly, tools to analyze. Thirdly, tools to fix. And fourth, you need to be able to understand if the problem is fixed or not. I'll try to use those 4 contexts when illustrating the features in this demo. We can start with an overview here. We'll start with sites, I will later move to applications. So here you get a list of all your sites that you have available. You get a status if they're okay or not, how many hosts you have in each cluster. So down here we see we have the 3-node cluster. There's also very important contextual information. Do I have applications running on a site? Do I have tenants assigned to a site? That's important because if you have an issue on a site where you have an application, that's much more important than, for example, Bombay here where you have no application, so an issue there is not so critical. You can narrow down here, so you can have search for sites that have hosts that have problem or are disconnected, etc. So that will help you focus across all your 10,000 sites. Another important feature in order to identify you have issues is built-in alarm management. So whenever there is an issue, there will immediately be an alert here that you can inspect, and I'll show that also later in the demo. Let's dig into a site. We can pick this edge cluster here. So the overview you get of a site is the hosts. In this case, we have 3 hosts. In the Avassa system, we focus on having states on objects. Sometimes observability discussions are too focused on logs. Digging into logs on all your sites and all your hosts in order to sort of infer if you have a problem would not scale. So for each object, we have a state. We have a state that the edge host is healthy and also about the cluster. We aggregate that from underlying indicators like disk, etc. So apart from the state, we collect metrics. So every 30 seconds we collect metrics on the host health. So you can see the volume usage, CPU usage and memory. And that is constantly monitored. It's stored on the built-in pub/sub bus. So we can dig down into one individual host and see metrics. This will enable you to monitor the metrics going back in time and now also plotted in real time. This is stored, as I mentioned, every 30 seconds and for a long time back. So this is available on each site for each host. You can select to filter this, to stream it to your central log analytics solution if you so like. But by default it lives on the edge site. Also, there are other metrics that we collect. What you did see there was an example of the host metrics. So we collect metrics for the host, as I mentioned. I'll show you some other observability metrics that are relevant here that we collect on the site. For example, a scheduler, meaning whenever the local scheduler on the site schedules a container application to a certain host, moves it to another host, you'll be able to monitor those. Later on in this demo, we'll see the application metrics. Another important thing is the audit trail log. So if you suspect intrusion, every access to the site through APIs, web UI, command line, etc. is of course logged. Those were a couple of metrics. You can read the reference manual, but all of those will help you when you analyze issues on the site. And we can do an example. Let's pick the host metrics again, and you can search from now and 5 minutes back, and this will give you the result output here in JSON. That was a glimpse on the site metrics. Let's go back. Let's see the hosts here. And at this point in time, we can generate a problem. So here, I created a large file, and we can see immediately that by the built-in host monitoring, we get an indication here of the volume usage. We also change the state of the host, that this threshold is reached, and also the complete cluster indicates that we have a problem in this cluster. 1 out of 3 hosts have a problem. You can see how it propagates all the way up to your site overview list here to the left. So if you're monitoring your site list like this, you immediately get an indication. For example, if you would have enabled the filter that just show me hosts and sites where I have problem, that site will only be visible, and this is probably what you have on your knock screen, not the complete list. You'll also get an alert up here, so it says host in distress, you can view the details, and you also have a complete alarm history. So this is an example of all the alarms that has occurred in the system. So that was a first glimpse on site observability. We have state on the hosts on the site. We have metrics that are collected, various metrics related to site and host. We also have alerts to indicate when you have an issue so that you can trigger actions to fix the problem. Of course, all of that is available over APIs, so you probably have your alarm system already, and you can then subscribe to the built-in alarms we have in the Avassa system. There was a site monitoring. Let's move on to applications. So as you did see in the beginning of this video, if you're focusing on your infrastructure, you get an overview of your sites, and if you have any issues on those here to the left. You can turn to the applications here instead, and if you're responsible for applications, this is where you would like to start. So here's the catalog of your applications, and you can see at how many sites they are running, and there will be a red sign here if it was an issue on any of the sites. So you get an overview of your applications, how many sites, and if everything is okay. Let's drill down into one of the sites then. Let's pick our old friend, the Edge cluster here. So when you pick your application and navigate all the way down to a specific site, so now I'm looking at an application instance, so to speak, running at one specific site, one specific cluster. Here you get an overview of restart counters, the structure, you get an indication on which host it's running at. So you know if you have an issue, you can talk to your IT team to look at that specific host. You get a list of the services, and remember, a service is a number of containers, so you'll get a usage version of that. You go all the way down to the containers and see detailed information of each container. You can see the actual usage of resources per container here at the site. And you'll also reach the logs. So this is really interesting. If you're analyzing a problem with your container application, you can use the Avassa system to reach to that site and get hold of your container logs, because the Avassa system picks up the container logs and stores them on the local pub sub bus on the site. So you have the history of the logs as well as you can stream them. So in this case, I'm going to look at the container logs since 5 minutes and forward. So now I'm streaming the container logs back 5 minutes, but also streaming live. Any new entries will directly be shown here in the web UI. So that's a very important tool to do remote analyzing of any issues of your applications on the site. Let's go back to the containers here. Another very important tool is that you can go all the way down into a shell of the container. So now I'm inside the container on that site and can see what's going on. I can also do a PS here to see the processes. Let's go create some issues here. Let's kill that guy. So we can see immediately in the web UI that it restarts, and it's starting to running its probes, and soon it will be up and running again, back to normal state. So again, I did show you two very important remote troubleshooting tools: fetching the container logs, streaming the container logs, and doing a exec interactive directly into the container itself to do whatever troubleshooting you need. Let's go back to the overview here. Probes are very important. Probes in the Avassa system, you can configure for an application how to black box test your containers. And you might be well aware of these 3 probes that are known from the Kubernetes ecosystem. So when you configure probes in the Avassa system, these will of course be running at each individual site. And that's very important, since one site is not as the other site. You might have local networking issues on one site and not on another. So with configured probes, you get constant black box testing of your applications on each site. an issue on one of the sites will immediately trigger up. Let's get some problems into this application. So I'll go back to my container here, just generating a problem on that. This is just a way for me to create a error code on the readiness probe. So now the readiness probe will say that there is bad feedback on the readiness probe. You can see that we have a failure on the readiness probe on that container. Interesting here is that I also talked about this a bit in the site observability. We are always propagating state. So we have a problem on the container that propagates all the way up to the service. Imagine you had the number of containers that will propagate to the service, and it will also propagate all the way up to the application and look all the way to the left. So if you're responsible for a specific application, you can immediately see that visitor counter, that application has an issue on some of the sites. If you click that, you can get the site overview, and you can see that on the edge cluster you have an issue. So with that you'll get very good insight, an indication that you have an issue, and of course you'll also get an application error here. So that will help you monitor your application. So again, I'm emphasizing the use of synthetic probes, super important in order to do that. And then of course, what is the issue? Can be a local networking issue or something else. We can always try to restart here. So we have built-in tools to restart the services remotely, as you see. Now it's restarting, it's running the readiness probe, and soon we see if that did help the issue. Back to normal. So that was an example of a built-in tool that can help you remotely fix issues. I will continue the application observability demonstration with focusing a bit more on how important context is when we're talking about observability. You can't just look at container logs because that won't tell you about the application state. So let us return to the readiness probe example. The previous example, we had the visitor counter running one service instance with one container. I've now running two replicas here. So the same service instance and the same container is actually running as two replicas on each site. What happens now if I fail the readiness probe one of the sites? So now this is very important. So now you see that I failed the container and I'm failing that service instance. And this replica is failing, but not the other replica. And then we consider the application being healthy. So remember, previous example, we aggregated the state all the way up to the application. In this case, the application is actually running well because we have two replicas. This was an example of how important context-aware monitoring is in the edge use case. Let's move on with having a fault on a host on the site that will have an impact on running application and show how we reschedule things to restore application availability. So I have the visitor counter running at the edge cluster. You can see that it's running on edge host 1 here. So if I go back to the cluster view, you can see the edge cluster and the hosts, and edge host 1 is actually serving that instance. I will now stop that machine and see what happens. So we can see that the host is down. We can see that the site has an issue, that one of the hosts are down, propagated all the way to my site list. If I go back to the application, and we can see that currently it's running on 20 out of 21 sites because it's being rescheduled. It's starting on that site, and now everything is green and the application availability is restored. We'll finalize this demonstration with some information on how you can navigate between infrastructure and application. And as you know, that's typically a blame game. So in the Avassa system, we maintain the relationships between the application layer and the infrastructure layer, which will greatly help you when you analyze, also help you communicate between teams. So if we go back to the application view here, if I'm responsible for the visitor counter, if we go down to the edge cluster, what's very important that you can drill down into the application and you can see where it's running. So I know that this service instance is running on a specific host. So that helps you doing service impact and root cause analysis. If you have an application issue, you know which host it's running on. This is dynamically maintained. And the other way around is also true, that you can go to a specific site and you know which applications are running there. You also know if there are different tenants. There's a separate video on tenants. So if someone is complaining at the application layer or from a tenant, you can immediately see their corresponding applications and the running state. So both directions, applications to infrastructure and infrastructure to application. That was the end of this demo. Thank you.